All right, well, the Nasdaq 100 future is edging a bit lower this morning. The Magnificent Seven stocks moving in a number of directions here. Tesla and Apple trading to the downside. You're looking at some pressure here. Nvidia, though, continuing its upward trajectory. So what does this tell us about the market rally and where we go from here? We want to bring in Craig Johnson. He's Piper Sandler's managing director. Craig, it's great to have you here. So the big debate right now on Wall Street, whether or not the massive rally that we've seen in tech, if it still has room to run, or if we're starting to see a bubble form. What do you think?
Well, what we've been publishing and what we've been talking about is that this is a market that needs to ultimately sort of digest some of these gains. And what we've been talking about is that this market enters an HLTR, or a high-level trading range, where we end up consolidating. And we think that this sort of consolidation is a normal sort of price action that you see, not only after having a very big run in the market coming out of Q4 of last year, but also what you typically see in election years. Markets end up consolidating ahead of elections. And again, we think that'll probably be the case. And then in terms of the Mag 7, they've had a very strong run, of course, but the Mag 7 is really now the Fantastic Four, as you're not seeing as many of those stocks like Apple, as you've mentioned, and also Tesla. They're no longer participating along with Alphabet. So this is a market that needs to pause and consolidate, but again, we think can still move higher throughout the end of the year.
So what are the Fantastic Four that traders, investors out there should be focusing in on?
Well, I think you got to continue to focus in on Microsoft. They're still doing very well. Amazon is still doing well. NVIDIA is still constructive and pushing higher. You know, out of those sort of three names right there, they still are participating, still doing well. And from my perspective, until we see some sort of break in NVIDIA, which has been sort of a single stock selection for a lot of people in this market right now, we need to see that stock sort of stay in this uptrend, stay above its 50-day moving average. And if it does, that's terrific. But again, it's been a big winner. It is probably due for some profit taking. But until you start to see the sell-off, I would stay patient with it. Hold the position.
Craig, what about the fact that so much of the market's gains here over the last 18 months driven by only a handful of stocks? We talk a lot about that concentration, the risk that can potentially portend here for the broader market. What's your read on that, given where levels and valuations currently are?
Well, we look at this sort of concentrated market. It's been great. It's pushed everything higher. That being said, we think the Mag 7 is going to become the Lag 7, as they're going to end up consolidating in here. And you're starting to see that happen with Apple consolidating and some of these other names. And I think at this point in time, we're going to start to see a broadening out of this market. And this broadening out of this market happens when the market corrects. People take profits out of those Mag 7 or Fantastic Four stocks, and they start coming down cap. That's going to put a floor under this market as it begins to broaden out. But right now, I could take some profits in a lot of those names and just wait for the consolidation to come into play. As I've written in our most recent publication we put out, I think it's more likely to have a 10% downside move in this market than the next 10% being up.
And so with that type of consolidation or even some profit taking to emerge here, what sectors are most prime for rotation into that have been untapped at this point?
Well, I don't think there's a lot of people paying really a lot of attention to financials, number one. There's obviously been some weakness there, but as you go through and you look at all parts of financials, not just the regional banks or the money center banks, but some of the asset managers and some of the asset plays, you continue to see some pretty good looking charts sort of beyond just the banks. So financials would be one area. The second area would be services. Companies like Accenture that will benefit and participate in consulting services for AI, because there's a lot of CEOs that just are not familiar with what's going on with AI or how it's really going to impact their business. There'll be a lot of consulting work done there. And then lastly, tech outside of the Mag 7 still look very good. I often say to people, if you want to go down cap, trim your Apple and buy IBM, because IBM is breaking out of a 14-year base on the charts, and it's looking like it's going to be a better outperformer than Apple at this point in time.
Craig, when you looking ahead to tomorrow and Thursday, what we could hear from Fed Chair Jerome Powell, obviously not expecting to hear anything material in terms of the plans to potentially cut rates, but do you think the market is still being a bit too optimistic with the 3 rate cuts expected before the end of the year?
3 rate cuts is certainly possible. If I go out and look at the world interest rate probabilities, that appears to be possible. What is happening, though, is you just keep pushing these out a little bit further. Some of the economic prints that have been coming through have been stronger, a little bit more constructive, and hence you're seeing these rate cuts getting pushed out. 3 are still doable. In my mind, I kind of think that in the June to July meetings is probably when you get your first cut. And then the question is going to be, do we get a cut and then a pause? And so that's what everybody's going to be listening for from the Fed coming up soon. And then also, is there any change in sort of hawkishness? I don't think at this point in time the Fed can raise rates. I don't think that's even a question. So it's got to be a cut and a pause, or a further push out and then a cut. But right now, 3 is still reasonable.